Hello, this is Richard DiGiacomo, and I'm the author of the History Teacher's Movie Guide, Choosing and Using the Right Films for Your Classroom. As you can see here on the cover of the book, sometimes as a teacher, you almost feel like a movie director trying to decide what to show your students. So some of the questions that might pop up are, am I showing the right movie for this class? Does it have anachronisms, bias, or historical inaccuracies? Is it out of date, or does it have objectionable content? Is it really worth the class time I'm spending on it? Let's take a look at the contents of the book. Chapter 1 talks about the do's and don'ts of using films in your classroom. A lot of teachers don't really use films appropriately, so this gives a lot of great tips on how they should and shouldn't be used. Sometimes you have to make a decision between should I show a drama or a documentary. So Chapter 2 addresses that issue. Chapter 3 tells you where you can find the right films for your class. Just because there's a film on a subject doesn't mean it is necessarily the film you should be showing for that class at that time. Chapter 4 has some great tips on how to find resources to fund a film library for your department. Chapter 5 deals with copyright issues so that we can be careful to follow the law. Chapter 6 is choosing the right format of films and equipment. There are many frequently changing formats for showing films, and it's tough for teachers to keep up with all of the changes. It's very important that a teacher knows how to operate the equipment properly so we're not wasting class time by misusing the equipment. Chapter 7 talks about anachronisms in film. This is very important for students to understand to develop their critical thinking skills. They need to know the difference between what is historically accurate and what is out of place. Chapter 8 is very important because it talks about bias in film. Many times filmmakers have their own hidden agenda when they're making a movie for entertainment and they don't really care about historical accuracy. So it's very important to show students films from different viewpoints and to help them to recognize when a film is in fact biased. Chapter 9 deals with films with violence and bad language. We don't want to show our students anything that's inappropriate. It's important to know how to use the right films in the right context for the right grade level. Chapter 10 has some great film related assignments where students can do things like do a movie review, look for anachronisms in movies. Chapter 11 has the best and worst dramatic films for history classes. These are my own personal reviews that I've done as a history teacher to tell you what are the great films that are worth showing and some of the real stinkers that are out there. Then I have several recent reviews of historical movies that have been made in the last few years that really focus on what makes this movie worthwhile showing in class or not. Chapter 13 talks about films that I wish should be made. There's a lot of great topics out there in history that strangely enough, no one has ever made a history movie about. Chapter 14 has recommended reading on films in education. And Chapter 15 is probably one of the most valuable things in the book. It has lists of every single historical dramatic film that have been made by historical era. So you can say, I'm teaching a particular era in history. What kind of movies are there from that time period? This book includes lesson plans that encourage critical thinking. You really get your students to examine movies in a critical thinking manner instead of just accepting whatever they see on film. Unfortunately, sometimes students believe what they see in film as history more than the real history itself. It also helps teachers find funding sources and equipment for films. A lot of times we'd like to show a good educational film, but we don't know where to get the money for it. It has a lot of great teaching tips and also addresses copyright concerns so that you're not showing movies that you do not have permission to show. It tells you the benefits of dramatic films versus documentaries. It also contains a lot of great movie reviews and lists of films for each historical era.